Hi, welcome. Hope Zvara here with Core Functional Fitness, and today I'm going to talk to you about chair pose. As primarily a yoga teacher, and for most of my viewers, I'm sure you practice yoga at some point or another, chair pose is a very popular pose. But I find that people are practicing chair pose incorrectly and really doing their body a disservice. So I'm here to talk about some hot topics in chair pose and really how to better or fire up your chair in a more functional and core-driven way. So I really believe in assessing the body from the bottom to the top. And so in looking at chair pose, it's oftentimes I'll find people sit into chair with some pretty skewed feet. Toes turned out, one foot further forward than the other, arches collapsed, pressure on the outer edges of the feet. So first looking down below at those cute little toesies and figuring out what's going on down there. Spreading the toes wide, really aligning the center of the foot. Now, a lot of people will say line up the outer edge of the foot with the outer edge of the mat, and for maybe 75% of your class, that will work really well. But what about the other 25%? We all have different shaped feet, especially because we wear shoes far too much. So really trying to turn the toes forward or turn the center of the foot forward, and then also looking at the two little creases, vertical creases, on each side of the knees on your backside to see if those are pointing straight back. So that's another way for you to be able to see if the leg and the foot are in neutral. Secondly is trying to spread the toes and activate them and lifting up or activating the feet towards the floor without gripping. So this will ensure that the three arches on each foot, yep, there's three, are activating as they should. This will also fire the legs more appropriately. So the arch of the foot feeds up through the inner thigh and into our pelvic floor, one of my favorite areas of the body. So that contraction, anal sphincter, perineum, urethra, basically the bottom part of your pelvis is contracting kindly. We're not looking for tension. We're just looking for support. This is really important, these basic foundations and principles, to get us set up for a better chair pose. But now the other question I often get asked is, I can't sit back in chair. So we find students coming this way and then even trying to bring weight back into their hips seems like it's just not going to happen. And I've been there, trying to pull my students' hips back in chair only to find that they're ready to fall over. Having them prop their heels up on a mat or on a wedge. And although that may solve the problem temporarily, it's not a solution. So we want to ask ourselves, why is that happening in their body? And for many of them, the calves and the back line of their body is very tight and very restricted. So we want to first start looking at the lower portion of the body, and that's releasing the calves. And so as I step back in nice neutral spine, Tadasana, nice neutral pelvis, I'm going to step back with one foot and turn the center of the foot straight forward. Keeping neutral pelvis, really important, no dumping, I'm going to bend my front knee. Now keeping the back heel on the floor, bending and straightening the back knee 10 times is going to help release the calf, release the Achilles, and really help me start to create more length, which is going to allow me to sit further back. Take a close look at the foot because the back foot will often turn in or out depending on what your normal patterns are. So it may feel like the foot is very internally rotated, but in essence it's just facing forward. As you work that calf release, what you may also find is that the arch collapses or the knee turns one way or another depending on what your fascia and what the muscles and tissues in your body have patterned. So I want you to try to maybe alter that or change that when you work with this functional calf release and see if that changes how you feel the release. Secondly, after you release those tight calf muscles, I want you to think about how to contract the pelvic floor and then gently contract the glute muscles. I often hear people saying, oh, you need to contract the glutes more so that the quads don't grab so much. But the only problem is that something beneath the glutes is really important, and that's the pelvic floor. So when you sit back into chair pose, for many people it's really difficult for them to know if they're contracting the pelvic floor or not because they've never used those tissues. So by placing something between the thighs, either a small mini ball, which I'm a big fan of, or a foam block, and then mirroring your feet to that distance, feeling the feet really connected to the earth, you've done your calf release, and you're going to find that it's a little bit easier to sit back. So my rule of thumb is always the knees are not a good place to put your body weight. The backside is a much better place. So if I engage on my prop between my thighs, I'm going to think about the pelvic floor coming up, and that in essence is going to pull my sit bones together. That contraction of the pelvic floor is going to trigger my glutes to contract on a scale of 1 to 10 at about a 5. You don't need a death grip. That contraction and release should take the stress and tension out of your quadriceps. So as I come into chair pose, okay, my feet are pointing forward, they're active and rooted, my calves are released so I'm not sitting so far forward into the knees. I'm able to sit back and stretch my glute muscles and at the same time contract my pelvic floor. That's going to give me a sensation almost like I'm smiling underneath my belly button because of that internal contraction. So we want to think about contracting at that portion of our body. Secondly, I want you to think about pelvic neutral and rib cage neutral. So that means when I come into chair pose, I'm not dumping out my abdomen. So pubis bone and hip bones run parallel with the wall you're facing. And as you sit back, all you're doing is tipping your neutral. So it may be more helpful for you to move your torso first. As you exhale, hugging on the block, tip 45 degrees forward, and then you're just going to sit back. So you're in this kind of lightning bolt-like shape. You're still engaging on the block, and you should be able to see your toes. So now as I engage my pelvic floor, I feel a little engagement with my glutes. My lower abdomen is smiling. And now if I lift my arms, I should not be flaring out my rib cage. So flaring out the rib cage is going to lose or kind of take away that rectus abdominis and transversus contraction. We need that core support to better support our lower back. So it's about opening the space in our lower lumbar, the point between the top of our hips and the bottom of our rib cage, and dropping down the front rib cage to increase the contraction here. So what you should be feeling if you get really good at honing in on these tiny little mechanics is a big stretch in the lower back if you're really practicing chair appropriately. So let's again review. I'm engaging, my feet are really anchored into the floor, okay? My pelvis is in neutral, my calves have been released. I'm going to hinge 45 forward, sit back into my hips, engage the pelvic floor. I feel the sit bones come together because of that. Keeping my front rib cage down, I feel some contraction on my front core. Now instead of swiping the arms up, which usually flares the rib cage open, I'm going to bend my arms and extend my arms alongside the ears. Now as I do this, my checkpoint is I have to keep the rib cage down, and as I choose to sit further back, when I do that, I'm going to feel more stretch in my QL and my lumbar dorsal fascia, so all that back belt that we have on our back body. So really important to keep the rib cage down. What happens is if you are one of those people, and it's totally okay if you are, that when you extend your arms, your rib cage comes out no matter what. I want you to come to cactus arms. So when I come here, rib cage down, I'm going to pull my arms out, palms face in, and then slightly retract the arms back. In cactus arms, what I'm doing is I'm training the shoulder girdle and the rib cage to do exactly what I just did when I extended my arms up, but in a much more functional way and for where I'm at right now. I always tell my students, this and this are working the same muscles, it just depends on where you're at right now. So I would much rather have you totally rocking cactus, palms in to create a little contraction, than struggling in a macaroni noodle back because you feel like this is where you have to be, or this is where you have to be. When we think about health and we think about practicing yoga, we think about practicing things like chair pose, we have to ask ourselves, is this helping me or is this hurting me? Am I just practicing this pose for the sake of doing it and saying that I've done it? Or am I really truly helping or wanting to receive the benefits that I can from the pose? So let's review chair pose so that then you can go back and practice for all these right reasons. Feet on the floor. We've done our calf release. Feet are forward. They're plugged in. Inner thighs are active. Pelvis is in neutral. Pelvic floor is contracted. I'm hinging forward, keeping pelvic neutral. I'm sitting back. Deep core contraction, almost as though I feel like a scoop is coming up, but I'm not sucking in. I have space in my lower back. Rib cage is down. I'm extending my arms up, plugging my arms in. There's that external rotation on the arms, dropping the shoulders back. Now if I feel like I'm struggling here, I'm pulling out to cactus with a slight retraction back without flaring the rib cage open. There's nothing for you to see if you look up, so just allow your eye line to be more forward and down. So the next time you rock your chair pose, you should be feeling like you are working all your muscles. Why? Because your body works everything in everything that you do. For more information, visit my website at hopezvara.com or my new website at hopecorefitness.com. You can also subscribe to my YouTube page if you haven't yet, and don't forget to check out my blog, which I write articles regularly on. From my heart to yours, from my soul to yours, thanks so much for practicing with me today. Namaste.